I've been asked questions on why we start reading with phonemic awareness and not bringing letters at first. I'll try to address these questions with this podcast, and you can also view a few video recordings showing different ways to teach phonemic awareness skills. The first thing I want to address is phonemic awareness does not use letters. Phonemic awareness is not used when trying to write letters either. Once letters are involved, it becomes phonics, which then goes under the umbrella of phonological awareness. Introducing letters with sounds before students realize that words are made of phonemes or sounds confuses at least half of the pre-reading students. How do children begin to speak? They listen to their parents, grandparents, their little friends that speak to them. They listen to songs. They listen to the television or the radio. All words are made of sounds. And eventually they connect an image to the word, such as milk to a young child would mean, I want a glass of milk. When you start teaching children, you want to use their listening skills and their speaking skills because that's how they learn first. They speak by what they listen. So it only makes sense to continue to work on listening and speaking skills when they come to school or as they're a preschool or a TK. So you want to work on those skills before combining sounds to letters. Instead of having a child learn the ABC song or coloring ABC letters, we should start to work on words that they use in their conversation. We begin to break up words into phonemes. An example would be, let's use the word cat. I'm going to say it slowly. Cat. K-a-t. There's 3 sounds there. You want the children or the students to begin to hear those 3 different phonemes. Phonemes are the smallest unit of sound. So once they begin to hold those phonemes in their head and you play with more words, they begin to have connections to, wait, I did that with cat, and now we did bat, and wait, the at was the same, but the b changed. You're not having them talk about letters. You're having them work on sounds. So technically, you're giving them background knowledge on sounds. You want them to hold the phonemes in their head so they begin to rhyme, make nonsense words, manipulate phonemes. So take one phoneme out, add another phoneme. What word did you make? Is it a nonsense word? Is it a real word? So take, for example, again, let's go back to cat. Cat. So you say, once you feel they're ready, and I wouldn't do this right away. You've got to play with just sounds for a long time. But you say, okay, we're going to take k, and now we're going to change the beginning to b. What word did we make? If the child can go bat, then you know they're holding sounds in their head. Many students that aren't ready for that will get confused. They might say cat again, or they just might say at. Then I might say take the b away and add n, and we get nat. Now, I don't care if they haven't spelled that correctly. What I want to know is, did they sound the phonemes out? Teaching phonemic seems really easy to adults. It's really actually hard because we keep using letters. We really want to keep that we're working on sounds only, because a child that can't hold sounds cannot go to phonics. That's why they struggle, because they have no background knowledge in their head to hold sounds. And as soon as you put a sound with a letter, if there's no background knowledge, it's very confusing to them. So we would start about age 4, and you'd start to work on sounds that go with pictures that you're showing them. I always try to stay with 1-syllable words such as cat and bat and dog and mat and even ice. So you want to take just 1-syllable words. Don't get into big, long words because that gets confusing with phonemic awareness. So the question again is asked, how often would I do phonemic awareness? Well, with a 4 to 6-year-old every day. And I would say more than once a day. So you're always, as a teacher, as the homeschool parent, looking for opportunities to sound words out with the phonemes. You want to play with it. You want to rhyme with it. I can remember my daughter being in the car and she'd say lake. And I'd say, what else rhymes with lake? And she'd say make. And she might not because she was young. But you begin to just play with those sounds. When they finally can hear the sounds and they finally can manipulate by adding or deleting, you know that they're ready to go to phonics. Because phonics is where the letter gets hooked to the sound. They connect together. And then, of course, they're ready to decode, sounding words out, or even encode by writing words on a paper. Working with phonemes. A good way to find pictures is to use picture books. So use a picture book, use their illustrations to pull out words that your child can say and then sound out with you with phonemes. Make sure you say the word slowly. And you also want the child then to repeat the word with you so you know they've heard the sounds that you've said. So if I say cat fast, I'm not really delineating those phonemes. So cat, at, k, at, b, at. You want to hear those sounds. You want to break them up. I also like to show them how I'm breaking them up, like using my fist or my arm going down my arm, or have them tap on the table. But there's another great example that you can actually use when you get into phonemic awareness. So I love Kevin Henke books, and he uses a lot of mice or a mouse in his books. So let's talk about mouse versus mice. So I might see the word mouse by looking at a picture and say, what is that? It's a mouse. Now we know there's 5 letters in that, but we're not worried about that. We're worried about the sounds. So say mouse. Ow, s. 3 sounds. 3 sounds. Now say, okay, now we have more than 2 mouses on the page. What do we call that? Mice. Let's sound that out. I, s. 3 sounds also. You can also then talk about singular and plural there. So you're actually beginning to talk about grammar even through phonemic awareness. I think that's where people haven't understood how much you can actually teach when you're teaching phonemic awareness. You want to make every moment that you're teaching a child teachable. Don't waste time by being stuck on one discrete skill. If something comes to you and you know it would be beneficial to your child to add a layer of knowledge, feel free to use it right then. Now, the middle sound, like in cat, k, at, is the hardest to delineate. This is where kids begin to break down with phonics because they can't hear that middle sound, which usually is the vowel. So that's the last thing you really want to work on before you get into phonics full on. So you say, okay, I've said cat, k, at. Now let's take the a away and add eh. So when they take the sound eh and they put it with cat, it should sound like k, eh, t. It is a nonsense word. But if they can say that, you know they're holding that sound. Let's try the I. K, I, t. Now that's a word, but they still took the a and put in the I. Then they're ready for phonics. What you're trying to do here is to visibly have the child show you what they hear. Many times as a homeschool parent, as a teacher, we are assuming children have learned it. Make sure you have opportunities to actually see it or hear it. Tap it on the table. Run it down the arm. Show me that you've heard the sounds. You are always working on having them hear the phonemes and hold in your head. This activity is actually very beneficial to all students, but really beneficial to second language children because they're working on 2 languages which all have different phonemes. While teaching phonemic awareness, you also can use an example to teach more of a worldview. So let's take the example of showing them a baseball bat. Now, baseball, I would not try to sound out with phonemes. I would just say, how many beats do we hear in this word? Baseball, 2 beats. Now let's break up the bat. B-at. At that moment as a teacher, you can say, is there another bat besides a baseball bat that you know of? Hopefully they're going to talk about the bat that flies around at night. If not, this is your opportunity to show that words have multiple meanings. And when we read a sentence, we have to decide, are we talking about a bat that hits a ball? Are we talking about a bat that flies at night? So again, you get to teach more than just the phonemes. So by the end of talking about 2 bats, you could talk about, hey, that animal is nocturnal. It's a mammal. It eats insects. One of my favorite books to read about bats is Stella Luna. What a wonderful picture book to read and talk about bats that fly at night. The best thing about bringing background knowledge for that worldview is when children read, They have to have connections to other things in the world. So the more we build our background knowledge, two different ways, with phonemes to hold the sound, but then also with knowledge on what is a bat. What kind of bat are we talking about? Think of how many things you know that children need to know. The biggest mistake that we're making in schools is we're having children fill out worksheets. We're taking a lot of time to fill out a worksheet that does not show learning. I, as a teacher, when I teach, it's about children listening, speaking, and speaking back to me. There is no learning with filling out a worksheet. Teaching should be fun for you and the child. Don't rush the reading process. I know parents want to say my child's reading by age 4 or age 5, but most of the time it causes great anxiety if we're pushing our kids to get into phonics faster than they're ready. There is a readiness to reading, and it goes all the way up to age 8. So remember to go back, look at pictures in books, go back to having them play with rhyming words, hold the sounds in their head, add or delete sounds in spoken words. Get them ready to teach phonics to them. When you find that students are able to pick up the sounds, connected letters, then you know that they're ready to go to phonics. There's a problem, though, when you're reading to your children that many times a child will have memorized words, and you think, oh, they're reading. They're reading because you've read books that might have been too easy, and it was really easy for some kids to pick up words. The problem is if you've never taught phonics to them, by the time they get to maybe 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, they give up because there's too many words and you can't memorize all the words. So be very careful that you don't miss the step of also teaching letter sound patterns. Everyone benefits from doing phonemic awareness. Everyone benefits from being taught phonics. When you're reading picture books, it's a must to every child. I think I started reading to my daughter when she was probably age 1. As soon as she would start to listen as I read a book, I started reading to her. I love books, and I wanted her to love books. Try to find books that have a rich vocabulary, not books that are very simple. Keep those for the children to read on their own, to start to decode with them when they're ready to do phonics. If you're reading to a book, or reading to your child, I want you to look at the pictures and the text and talk about how they go together. I want you to think about how you could ask questions to elicit a discussion with your child. There's also many times implicit themes in picture books. Ask a deeper question to go, why did the author do that? Why did that character do that? Why did that character change when this happened? Remember, you can use picture books for phonemic awareness, and you can use to model expressive reading, and you can use them to show that those little squiggly black things on the page actually have meaning. Young readers are always watching and listening to adults when they read or speak. After reading a book, remember to ask the question going beyond the basic comprehension. Not just, what color was the dog? Maybe ask, why did the dog run away? Go back and say, let's look at the pictures. Let's look at the text. Oh, there was a loud sound that scared the dog. Or a high wind came up and rustled the leaves and it scared him. Have them start to use implied meaning from the text or the pictures. Look for clues. We always want to be teaching that our children should be thinking as they read or as they listen to a reader. We want to create critical readers. We want to create metacognition with our children. Teaching students to understand inferred meaning is a must for good readers. And you have to discuss books because that's what good readers do. Unfortunately, some kids do not break the code of reading, even at age 8. And if that happens, then you as the teacher, as the parent, might need to get an expert in and see if there's a learning disability. But most kids, if you do what we've talked about, phonemic awareness, going into phonics, discussing books, you will have created a reader. Everything you do with picture books, from using the pictures for phonemic awareness to teaching reading, you need to always model your own thinking. What were you thinking? What were you thinking there? What was your implied thinking? Did you ask yourself a question as you were reading? I want to discuss this with you. I want to analyze the traits of the character and support it with the evidence that I found from the book. You're always modeling what good readers do. Reading is more than reading a book once. Read it more than once. Read it several times. Talk about it in different ways. A balanced reading program strives to get a child to deeper understanding, to listen or read for meaning. That is the goal of reading for meaning. The first step in reading is phonemic awareness and reading books to children. The more a child gleans getting meaning from a book by listening to an adult, the more they'll want to read a book as soon as possible. The more you play with sounds in spoken words, the quicker the child is ready to read. You are creating a lifelong reader, and it all starts with phonemes.